What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Ryan. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Ryan. And boy, do we have a special guest. Ryan Begelman is in the house again. What's up, my man?
I feel like we're on like one of those like radio shows in like Miami.
Yeah, dude. I roll fast. I get to it. Oh man, welcome back to the show, man. I'm so pumped to have you again.
It's good to be here with you.
Yeah. It was like what was it, like around Christmas, I guess, right? So like 3 months ago. Is that right?
That's right.
Fuck, yeah. Time flies, man. How's your Q1 doing? How you been?
Everything's great, man. I'm ready to get into it. I know we left off with Summit at Sea, and but everything's good with me, man.
Oh, I love it. So let me give a little bit of background for listeners. If you didn't catch the last episode, we aired it, I think it was like March 9th, I want to say. So it was just recently we aired Ryan's recent episode. It was a week or two ago. So you guys need to go check that out for part one. I like completely, like, we were like 98% of the way done with the show. I'm like, Ryan, we barely got started. We got to do part two. So I got him on the spot on the show, and he agreed. So lucky me and lucky you guys. Ryan's been generous at this time. But it was a really fun conversation. If you don't mind, I want to just give a quick like overview of your background, and then we can jump right into like kind of pick up where we left off. Does that work for you, man?
Yeah, sounds good.
So you guys, Ryan is an executive and life coach currently. He's the former CEO of Bisnow Media, and he's a co-founder and former CEO of Summit. Some of you guys may know Summit Series, Powder Mountain, all that good stuff. It's funny. I was at a dinner the other night, and actually, it's like your world. Like half my friends are like skiing Summit Powder right now, and the other half of my friends were at a dinner, and they're talking about they were at Summit Series in the Cabo like a few months ago, and they were just like, and I'm like, oh, I know Ryan. I'm like, I know the dude responsible for both those things. But they were, and they were just like talking about things that they've been doing. So the things you've created are a part of my world. And I got invited to go. I used to have I mentioned on last episode, I used to have a house next door to Eden in Huntsville. And I have a friend who has that place in Eden. He's like, oh, you got to come out. And I'm like, oh, I can't come out. But I got invited to Powder Mountain for next week, but I'm not going. I'm going to Peru instead. So I'll be in Machu Picchu with my kids. So man, so good to have you back. It was such a fun show that we did. Why don't we give like a quick recap of where we got to in the show? Why don't you give your version of the recap, and I'll fill in the blanks if there's anything. Like where do we start? Where do we end?
Yeah, I think we talked about my journey from private equity and banking into this sort of like buying my way into Bisnow, which is this media and events company for commercial real estate executives, and starting to scale that, and around at the same time, co-founding Summit, starting to produce Summit events, starting with 19 people, then 85, then 100 and some odd, then 200, then 750, and eventually doing our first Summit at Sea in 2011. And basically this idea of like, my dad was this kind of conglomerated entrepreneur, and I wanted to build something similar. I wanted to have, no one owned any equity in my company that wasn't like a co-founder or an insider or, part of my team. So no equity, we're not going to take outside capital. We're going to bootstrap everything with our own little, small amount of savings that I had from banking, so that I could control my destiny and create this kind of conglomerate of cash flow businesses that, for me, were about unlocking fun and freedom and creativity, and of course, financial reward as well. And be able to kind of steward my own ship in a way that you maybe can't do as easily when you raise venture, and you're beholden to a bunch of investors.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the vision. And I think the last episode, like, we started covering like, how did I do that? Well, why, and sort of what were the first stages? And I think we made it from like 2008 or so up to like maybe 2011, at least in the Summit story. And I think, we haven't covered as much of the Bisnow story.
Yeah, so let's kind of go there. So first of all, like you got to go check out the last episode, guy. There was so many like just nuggets of gold. Mostly a lot of them around really like. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Summit series, like go check it out. I mean, that's just this epic story of a bunch of people that came together and brought in some of like the most like A-list like party people in like the late aughts, early 2010s, and it became this kind of phenomenon that happened that Ryan and his co-founders created. But Bisnow is really like where you had a much like it may be a less of a glamorous, if you're like talking glamour, you're talking Summit. If you're talking more like entrepreneurial chops, Bisnow is where that story happened. So why don't we maybe educate the audience a little bit about like, you can even go back and tell a little bit of the beginning of that story, but talk about your experience with Bisnow, because I think any entrepreneur that's listening to this, they're going to learn a lot from your experience there.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for acquisition entrepreneurs, or people who want to bootstrap a business, Bisnow, in my opinion, was like a really great case study in how to do that. I was working at the Carlyle Group, working in the U.S. Real Estate Fund. I'm reading Bisnow, which is a commercial real estate newsletter about in DC, that was created by this guy Mark Bisnow, and was sort of co-founded by his son Elliot. And I had this sort of thought, maybe I could convince them to sell me a stake in the company, and I could come join them, or I could buy the company, kind of with that private equity sort of acquisition entrepreneur hat on. And in the end, they didn't want to sell me the company, but I got them to agree to sell sort of the rights to the company outside of Washington, D.C. And Elliot became my business partner, the son, and I decided we would go do that together. And then Elliot and I co-founded Summit. So it was in that early inning in like 2008 when I'm still working at Carlyle. I strike this deal with Mark Bisnow that I'm going to go to New York and launch New York, and I'm going to go to Chicago and launch Chicago while he's running DC. I'm going to take the formula he has for the newsletter and for the new conferences they just started doing, and I'm going to see if I can make those work in other markets. And in the end, Bisnow ends up being in 28 metro cities across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. And we sell it to a private equity firm for about $51 million. I put in about $46,500, and we distributed $64 million from the day I started till like the day we sold the company. So meaning we cash flowed $13 million that we distributed, and then we also sold the company for another $51 million. And I think one thing that was also unique is I left the day of the sale. Like I set things up so that I didn't have to stay and have an earnout. And that wasn't really my goal. My goal was actually to build like this forever company that I could stay and own, for decades and compound. And for a variety of reasons to do with my business partners and the timing and the market, like we ended up selling it. But I just think it's a good example of like, you don't have to build a company where you take on a lot of outside capital and you dilute yourself to owning, less than a major part of the company. Because basically, if you'd sold Bisnow for, $250 million, you might have ended up with the same amount of money I made selling it for $51 million.
Right.
Because, me, Mark, and Elliot owned all of the company besides the equity that we gave to our leadership team. And we didn't have the stress of reporting to a board or talking to investors. Like I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are constantly, frankly, wasting time, in my opinion, like writing memos and updating board members and taking calls from small fractional investors who want to know, like, why haven't they gotten an update recently, or like a question about the update they just got. And in my opinion, like boards are mostly useless, and advisors are like everything you need to know. You can basically, most things you can learn for free by just calling entrepreneurs and asking them, hey, how did you do this? Or calling the head of marketing or mid-level people at other similar companies and being like, hey, how are you doing this? What software are you using? What was the first step? What does it cost to do the thing, etc. And so I'm not saying that there's no reason to raise venture. Like obviously, if you want to build a rocket company or a massive multi-billion-dollar company, like especially if you want to do it in less than 5 years, like you probably have to raise outside capital. But for me, I think a lot of people might be happier, and certainly I was, just bootstrapping a business or buying a small cash flowing business, which has become a little bit more popular of a notion, but I actually think it'd be a lot more popular.
Yeah, it's funny. Cody Sanchez pushes that pretty hard. She's like all about pushing like she like oversimplifies it. Where I'm like, that's not true. Because I advise a bunch of CEOs and have over the year, especially since my exit, and like I had these guys who ran a laundromat business, right? These cousins, and they had like 15 locations, and they were like, and then they go into like these like Latin specific, like kind of Latin-esque neighborhoods, and they'd build these safe, beautiful little laundromats. And they had 13 of them. And I'm like, hey, what do you think about what Cody Sanchez says about laundromats? They're like, oh, she's an idiot. like they're like talking shit on her. They're like, no, it's not that easy. It's hard, So I think business is hard. You got to like know that it's competitive.
I mean, look, building Bisnow was an obsessive 24/7, very hard thing the first 4 or 5 years, especially. What I'm pointing at is it's not I agree. I don't think it's easy.
No.
I just think the risk to reward is often better, because when you raise a bunch of money, basically what you did is you bought yourself a salary. So you're going to pay yourself usually less than you need for probably 7 to 12 years. And your investors think that you're a 1 in 10 chance, but you're a 1 in 1 chance. Like you don't have 10 of these going. So, and in fact, your investors discourage you from having more than one venture. Or
sure,
or
even then you're a 1 in 20.
yeah. So what I never understood that model, because I'm like, I don't want to be a 1 in 10 chance. I want to be like at least like 6 out of 10. Like I want to be like, and I want to be able to iterate and pivot a lot and not have to be spending a lot of time wasting time catching some outsiders up on like why they should be okay with the fact that we're like changing our business model, cutting prices, raising prices, firing people. Like it's a very messy endeavor the first 4 years of a company, in my experience. And so I just find there's a lot of friction and waste when you have to like be raising rounds and be thinking about capital. And so again, I'm not saying like don't do that. Like obviously, like I said, there's certain kinds of companies that are very capital intensive, but that's why I purposely choose companies that are not capital intensive to start, that are where the total addressable market is actually small enough that like I don't need a lot of capital to get rich. There's riches and niches. Like I'm going to start kind of small, but it's also very scalable. So it's not like so dinky that it's like some little niche agency that like you can't get to be millions and millions of dollars of revenue, but it's also not like some massive thing like building Salesforce, the CRM or something, where it's like I'm gonna have to spend 200 million before we even know if it can be profitable.
Right.
Or like WeWork, where it's like, they built it for years and then lo and behold, it's not profitable. It doesn't work.
Let me ask you a question, because I think that there's a paradigm shift happening right now with, AI, MLM, stuff like that. So, what are your thoughts on like applying that thought process to just what's happening with AI? Because I think that's kind of changing the landscape regarding like where there's opportunities, or is it the same idea, but it actually creates even more opportunity because you can kind of optimize those businesses better?
Yeah, I think AI for the time being supercharges everything I'm saying. Like, before, like starting business is still kind of risky because you still have to hire like a writer and a editor and a marketing person, and you still need a sales rep, and like AI is not going to do all that yet. But now it's like, I also needed a designer and a web coder and an engineer. Like you needed some people to just even get started, right? Now with AI, like an outsourcing abroad becoming much more common and easy. Like you could throw up a website and test a new product and like set up a Stripe account and plug them together and, have that up and running in like a day, or maybe even a few hours. So I just think AI makes it even cheaper and even less capital intensive to have a shot on goal at starting your company.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Now, having said that, the problem I'm seeing with a lot of my coaching clients is that it's very easy to start companies. Like it's really easy to get people to like your product. Like that to me is not rocket science. The hardest part to me is actually getting it to be profitable. And then scaling it is the next hard part. Like, so for example, like Bisnow, we had 12 email newsletters. one for lawyers, one for doctors, one for trade association execs, one for commercial real estate. 11 of them basically failed.
Really?
Right? Now, all 12 of them were insanely popular newsletters. Like, people want to read them. They can't stop opening them because we figured out a formula to make a newsletter extremely sticky. And, but only one of them, like, and like 8 of them made like $1 million in revenue. But only one of them could make 22 million in revenue, 30 million in revenue, 40 million in revenue, and millions and millions in profit. And like, that had a lot to do with luck and dynamics of the industry of commercial real estate. And also because I liked commercial real estate and I knew commercial real estate. And, I enjoyed meeting people in that. And some of the hires I had were kind of the right hire. Like, there was a certain paradigm, and it also had a lot to do with where the competition was and wasn't, and how deep the market was, et cetera. So my point is like, I see a lot of entrepreneurs who get all excited because they're like, "Oh, I made 100,000 in MRR," and I'm like, it doesn't really mean anything. Like, until you make like 100,000 in profit, like, we just don't know yet if you have anything here.
Yeah, that's it. Let's like double click on that, because like it's funny, like even using the example you just gave, and I have my own example of something similar. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs fall prey to this, and you actually kind of did it successfully though, which is, I think people get entrepreneurial like shiny object syndrome, right? Or they're like, oh, we did, like, I'll use your example. Hey, we had Bisnow, 22 million, sound like 22 million of revenue, and then we have these other Bisnow commercial real estate, and then we have Bisnow, these other 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever that number was, that were basically sound like they actually, unless they were amplifying the brand in some way, they actually sound like they almost distracted from putting more attention into the commercial real estate vertical that was where you're generating all your profit from. Am I thinking of this properly?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of this is timing, right? Like, I'm happy that we did all 12 verticals because we didn't know from day one which vertical would be the winner. But then the really hard part was in year 4 being like, let's shut down the other verticals.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of fighting between me and frankly, Mark Bisnow, my co-founder, about like, and others in the company, like, is this the right choice? And the arguments were really valid on all sides because, like, yeah, like those other things were bringing in not only revenue but profit at that point, and they also did bring brand cachet. And it was hard to tell. Like, maybe they are really important for the cachet. Like, for example, most of those newsletters were in DC, and DC's commercial real estate newsletter was doing 3 times the revenue and profit that all the other markets were, like, than New York or LA. So, like, some would argue that, like, we should keep DC the way it is. In fact, we should actually replicate what we're doing in DC and New York, because something about the other newsletters might be why real estate is doing better in DC. But ultimately, I made the call that, like, it's just every minute for me as a CEO that I'm even thinking about another vertical, like, there was almost a leap of faith where I had to say, like, if we shut those down, I think real estate will just take off.
Okay.
In like a totally profound way that we can't understand right now.
Did it?
Yeah, it did.
So I think, like, a lot of, so that was actually, like, I was hoping that was the punchline, because where I'm like, hey, it made sense to try it, to your point. I think a lot of times we have to try it. Look, if we don't experiment, we don't know. But at the same time, how's the saying? You stick to your knitting, right? And what I found is that, like, in my business, we had 7 different businesses within the business. Kind of, it was a version of what you just said. We were a wholesale mortgage lender and a correspondent mortgage lender, which means our clients were other lenders, right? Or brokers. We ended up going into servicing technology, insurance. We bought a soccer team. I literally owned a freaking soccer team in Europe. We had agency that did our marketing. We had ad agency. We had a real estate business. 7, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Darius, how many of them made money? 1. It made a lot of money. It paid for us to do all the other bullshit. And I remember at the end of that exercise, I exited the company, and, like, the only one that paid me was the one. The rest of them were like donuts, because they weren't really worth anything, because they were just like either break even or losing money. And I remember I said to myself, I was like, man, I'll never do that again. And so when I've advised a lot of entrepreneurs, I watch them because what gets you to start that first company is you're ideating, you love the chase of building something, and they want to, and then it's up and it's running. They're like, oh, let's go start this next thing, and I think that there's a seduction in doing that, and I actually think there's a discipline in really like not doing that necessarily, or if you're going to do that, bring in other CEOs to like run the businesses so that you're just like the chairperson who's overseeing it. Even then I'm not in love with it, but my learning was don't do that. Now I'm a person that does have my hand in a lot of different pots, but I usually have one that's like my one, and I'm like, that's where I'm going. But so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Number one. Number two is you're actually a person that did great work at Bisnow, but you were also doing all the summit stuff, and you, I guess, had your hand in a lot of pots. So, yeah, tell me how you think about that, because I'm pretty like biased.
I'm not opposed to having multiple ventures. I had 3 companies going at the same time, and eventually, even like we had a few other things going. And I for one, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with shiny object syndrome. Like I like to be stimulated, and it gives me energy to be involved in more than one thing. And like you have to know when to focus and like when to push hard and when to have some degree of like, narrowing in on a thing. I think it was really helpful to go wide actually at the first start of Bisnow because we didn't know what would work. Once it became more clear that like one thing is working, look, I wish 3 things had been working. Like there's a company called Industry Dive that's also a newsletter company. They have like 8 really successful newsletters. We just didn't have the luck to have, like, we tried really hard. There was one other newsletter, a federal technology newsletter. Like I thought for many years that was going to turn the corner because it was the second most successful newsletter. It just wasn't really happening. And the amount of effort it was going to take compared to the amount of effort I could put into commercial real estate at the time just like didn't make sense. So now, having said that, at the same time, like because I had partners, I was able to deploy a partner in, sort of not I didn't really deploy him, but he chose to do Summit. Elliot chose to focus on Summit. And so
Got it.
Now I basically was like his COO almost, like helping him operate Summit for the first 3.5 years. And then I came back a few different times. But like once it got to a good place, I replaced myself with like a COO. And then he was able to like keep going with that venture. And we were basically 50-50 so that like, okay, if you keep growing your thing, I'll grow my thing and we'll look after each other's thing. Which kind of worked and also had its problems, in all honesty. Like,
was one bet more successful than the other? Because that's where I've found in partnerships when you have multiple, like, and by the way, the reason we had 7 is we had 4 partners in my last business, and we all focused on different parts. And I have another friend, they have the same thing. They own 5 or 6 companies. There's 4 partners. They each kind of focus on their own, and then they kind of have each other's back. So I actually didn't realize you had that. What caused the friction? Was it that one was better than the other, or was it that one was spending more time on one than the other? Where was there friction for that to you?
Well, I think I think that Summit became increasingly a cultural like phenomenon in a certain world and had a lot of impact. I think in many ways, like arguably much more impact than Bisnow. And it grew a lot in revenue. Like it grew to, something like 20 million plus in revenue, but it was never very profitable. Whereas, except for Powder Mountain, which became like an offshoot of Summit that became more profitable, but also was not as profitable or as lucrative for us as Bisnow. And so I think that some of that had to do with luck, and some of that had to do with like leadership style and just what me and Elliot were solving for. I think when we started, we were more on the same page about what we were solving for. And I think as time went on, we had different needs and different preferences and like a different lifestyle. And just different strengths and weaknesses and things that we wanted, So we were young when we started. I don't think we knew exactly like who we were and how we would be different. I think if I started something today, I'd probably spend more time like talking about like what our desires are. Granted, people change and that's sort of hard to predict.
Yeah, interesting. So what year did you guys buy Powder? Was that 2015?
So then, like I think like around like 2011, 2012, Elliot and my co-founders Brett and Jeff and Jeremy, and Summit, they got really excited about Powder Mountain.
All right.
And there was a guy who sort of brought the opportunity to them, and they wanted to, joint venture with him and bring the Summit brand to this ski resort and develop it into sort of like a semi-permanent home, or at least like a master plan development community with the Summit brand, and for people in the Summit community who want to have a second home, at a ski resort that's sort of programmed by Summit and has like Summit, sort of brand.
Wow. So that was 12. Okay. So I think we talked about this last. So I bought a house in Huntsville in 05. So I skied powder from 05 to, and actually, I don't even know if I've ever skied it since you guys bought it. But yeah, that was one of the selling points of buying in the Ogden Valley and Ogden Valley is where the Powder Mountain is and where, Snow Basin is. And they're like, oh, this is the largest inbound ski resort in the United States. And you go there then before you guys bought it, and it was totally old school, and it's a really dope place to go skiing. So were you guys like, you got this opportunity to do the JV in 12, you're building Bisnow, you guys are running Summit Series. That's a lot. That's some really cool stuff going on. How did you guys end up finishing the JV, or did you guys actually just buy the whole thing yourselves?
Well, we bought the whole thing with this business partner, Greg.
Got it. Okay.
So we formed a joint venture with Greg. That joint venture bought Powder Mountain.
Got it. Okay, cool.
But the way that basically worked was in a way, we kind of stopped doing Summit events for, the event company. And we sort of started doing Summit events to promote Powder Mountain.
Right.
And so we started, we it was totally wild. I mean, we moved our whole Summit team to the Eden Valley, which is like a town that doesn't even have, as you know, like doesn't even have like a traffic light. Like it's basically like a rural town that happens to have this like massive mountain, as well as you said, like across from it is Snow Basin. It's this beautiful place with like a lake in the middle, circumscribed by these massive mountains. And it's actually the largest skiable terrain in North America. It's 10,000 skiable acres at Powder Mountain. And it's also one of the only ski resorts that's privately owned. It's like Vail is a lease from the government. Like a lot of these resorts are a lease from the federal government. And so you're talking about like, we basically bought like you buy a home, we bought a mountain.
I remember when you guys bought it, I was like, that's so random. I thought it was actually pretty brilliant too. And so, I mean, that's a wild idea. Was the gentleman who you JV'd with, did he have experience running mountain, or was did anyone?
Literally, we all have as close to zero experience as humanly possible. I was the only one who had any real estate experience whatsoever, just because I worked in private equity for a few years in real estate. But that doesn't mean I was a developer. And our partner Greg was sort of a serial venture entrepreneur. Like he was a venture capitalist and sort of deal maker. And then the rest of us basically learned on the fly how to build an event company called Summit. Like we don't know. I mean, and you couldn't pick a more complicated thing. Like, it's one thing to like flip houses or, buy apartment buildings. Like you're talking about your 9,200 feet of elevation, one very steep road going up to the top that's often covered in like heavy snow. You have to build roads, dredge utilities for miles through a mountain. You have to find water thousands of feet deep in the Earth's crust and build wells. And you have to drag electricity, fiber optic cables for internet. You need there's not very good cell service. You need to strike a deal with like a Verizon and put like a tower up. Like you're basically building like a town from nothing. And oh, by the way, you're immediately inheriting a ski co that's like a multi-million-dollar like 7-lift, like tens of thousands of people are showing up and skiing, and they love and value the ski. Like you don't want to fuck up the ski resort. Like these people love the ski resort. So there's also like, and there's restaurants, and there's there's ski school, and there's 300 employees in the winter. Like it's plus you have a development team, plus you need a brokerage team, plus you need a hospitality team, an F&B team. You're building maybe a hotel. We bought a property management company in the Valley, so you're managing 30 homes so people can stay in homes when they come to the like it's and you're producing conferences and you're hosting weddings. It's pretty bananas.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you left out the part that it's a dry county and you can't buy hard liquor up there. And so didn't you guys open a freaking liquor store in the Wolf Creek Lodge?
We opened a liquor store. We opened new restaurants. Look, big real estate developers do stuff like this. It's not like we're doing something no one's ever done. Vail Resorts does this all day. But we were basically in our 20s. I was the oldest one on our summit team. I was like maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm like 29 or something. We don't really, and you're in a place that doesn't have it's not like there's tons of labor that knows what they're doing, like in the valley, exactly. You're kind of importing people, and you're also working with the local, people that you can find. And there's a tremendous amount of risk. The mountain needs to be rezoned to some extent. It's got to be master plan approved. There's a whole there's design review. There's like people in the you have to obviously get things passed by the fire department, and the local people who live there have to be okay with what you're doing. It's quite an undertaking, and also we have no money.
So
it's not like we're billionaires or we're a private equity fund or something.
No, so you guys raised $40 million. You bought the resort. We're talking about all the complexities of this thing, and then walk us through, tell us a little bit about because from what I remember, what I understand is it ended up, I guess you may have gotten out of it before this, but didn't Reed Hastings, you guys, they got into trouble during COVID and Reed Hastings bought it, right?
Yeah, well, if you fast forward to the end of the story, Reed Hastings, founder and former CEO and chairman of Netflix, and billionaire, we had sold him a home lot, and he built a home on the mountain, just like another 120 some odd families that we sold home lots to. He joined our project, and he built a home. And he fell in love with the project. And I actually don't know a lot about his story in the project. I know he went from barely snowboarding to loving snowboarding 40, 50 days a year and loving it.
Wow. All right, cool.
And then he stepped down from Netflix full time as CEO to be chairman, as I understand it. And he wanted a new, project to work on. And he was, he loves the resort. And so he acquired the resort from us ultimately. And
were you out? Sorry, were you out then, or were you still in the project?
Yeah, I had actually already sold my interest a couple of years prior to that, to my partners in a board that had been formed. But yeah, my partners, I think, are either entirely out or largely out. I don't even really know anymore. But yeah, I think Reed owns most of it now.
So if you look back at that one experience, and I want to pivot to Bisnow because you had a really interesting exit there, and then I really want to talk about what you've been doing since. What was the one piece of advice you would have given to the group in 2012 on that deal? If you're hey guys, here's what this is going to look like. We're going to watch a TV show of our experience. What advice would you have given to young Ryan?
I mean, the truth is, I have learned a lot of this stuff at Carlisle. You want to generally do what you're best at and leave the things you're not best at, especially things that are very high risk. Unless you want to get really good at them, you might want to leave them to an expert. So, in hindsight, I would have probably partnered with a development company, and had a private equity fund come in, fund it, develop, have it, basically form a joint venture, license the Summit brand to the joint venture, strike what's known as a flag deal, where we're going to be the brand. We're going to take some percentage of revenue off the top in exchange for our know-how, our brand. And so we can build a team and fund a team to do hospitality and marketing and sales, which is what we're best at.
Yeah.
Including things that maybe a normal hospitality company wouldn't do, like Summit events, Summit programming, Summit talks, whatever. Let a development company that does development of resorts come in and run the development. Don't form and become a development company like we did. And take still have a large piece of equity and bring in a lot more money up front. So what we did was we sold lots to we sort of pre-sold lots to people in our community in order to fund
That's right.
buying and developing at least the start of the mountain. And that was a very unique deal that we borrowed from Yellowstone Club. That Tim Blixith, the guy who was this crazy lumber baron who built Yellowstone Club, this very famous private ski club that's become a massive success. We borrowed this from him, like from how he had done that. But I think we would have been better to fund more, raise more money up front, because then you could build a bigger lodge. You could show parents the vision from day one. Like the best ski resorts, like Martis Camp, that have done really well the last 10 years, they built a big lodge first.
Right.
They lose money the first 4 or 5 years on the membership, on the HOA, because they're basically preloading, front loading, having service, having a gym trainer when you show up at the gym. Like all those services are there. We basically bootstrapped it, so like the neighbors really went on a ride with us, kind of very gradually getting the things that like we ultimately wanted to provide to them, which I think was frustrating at times for them and for us, and I think also slowed the velocity of sales.
Interesting. So while you're building this audacious goal of building a private ski resort through Bootstrap, which is like, as I say, it is insane. All the while you're building Bisnow. Like, tell us like how big did you guys get it to? Tell us a little bit about the exit and how you stuck the landing on getting out without having to be stuck there.
Which I just want to say one quick thing about this is like, if you build a holding company, essentially, like I did, what I said earlier about, start with the bootstrap thing, get to cash profit. And then if you want, you could do another project that's financed in a different way.
Right.
Like I would have financed Powder a different way. But part of that was okay with me because like I still control Bisnow and I still control Summit. So like those are where like if I eventually lose control of Powder Mountain to the private equity fund, like for me, I don't mind because I have these other things going for me. Not that I want to lose control of Powder necessarily either, but like that, I'm just saying, like, I think like people should be smart about being flexible about how they approach like the different ventures.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to, I have a good friend who's probably one of the most successful people I know. He owns 30% of the Colorado Rockies, and he's my good buddy. His horse, he says every entrepreneur needs a horse. His horse is he owns a F ton of freaking commercial real estate. Tons. Like the sports teams, he owns 3 or 4 professional sports teams. Probably a lot of his net worth is tied into that, but the moneymaker that got in there was the commercial real estate, and that's his horse. So I think that's speaking to like, hey, your horse was Summit, your horse was Bisnow. This other things, you took a fly, you end up like maybe making that your third horse, but you could have taken a flyer on it and done it in maybe a more like leveraged way, right? That's what I heard you say.
Yeah, exactly. Like Bisnow, like I mentioned, distributed 13 million from before we sold it, plus my salary, right? Plus Mark Bisnow's salary. So like that thing is making like more and more money. Not for the first 3-4 years, it was break even, but eventually it starts making money. So now it's like you can kind of understand how we could go and do something wild like Powder Mountain, which again, if I was to do it over, I wouldn't do it as wildly as we did it. I would have structured it in a better way. But like, so I just want to give people permission, like really focus, get something working, and then if you want to do like kind of like Elon Musk is doing or Bezos is doing with his rocket company, great, go start another fun project. There's nothing wrong. And that's another reason, by the way, to avoid venture, because if you do raise venture, your VCs will tell you you can't do that.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I just raised a bunch of private equity, and I gave a list of things I was working on, and I had to disclose it, and they were cool with it, but it wasn't like I could do whatever the hell I want. To your point, like they're a majority stake owner in our fund, so they want to make sure that their principals are working for them, right? And they have a fiduciary to their LPs, so it all makes sense. Like that, like I think it's great advice, like super sage advice. And listeners, like this is like you're welcome ahead of time. So hey, Ryan, I know I want to, we got a little bit of ground to cover, but I want to like kind of like talk about the Bisnow like landing and then like the exit on that, and then I really want to talk about like like, where'd you go after? Because you're doing some really cool things right now. So talk about that. You guys built Bisnow from this like really small, to your point, break-even business to something that was much more substantial, big team, making a lot of money, and sold the business, like I think you had mentioned, for $51 million. Tell us a little bit how you were able to, why you guys decided to sell it, and then how you were able to get out without having to be, have, I guess, golden handcuffs and have to stick around and deal with it post-exit.
Yeah. So, in brief, Bisnow starts off as one newsletter in DC. Mark's running it. Now, eventually, he does some more newsletters in DC. I launch New York. I do commercial real estate in New York. I actually did try legal and some other things. Eventually, we launched in a bunch of markets. There was a million learnings that we probably don't have time to go into about like the hiring, the firing, like how to get the right number of employees for the right number of, you need this many coordinators, you need this many. There was kind of like an assembly line because we're producing 350 conferences a year eventually. So
wow,
like each of those conferences has 250 to 1,000 ticket buyers who are showing up, who are wearing suits and ties and are commercial real estate executives for like a 2 to 3 hour event. And we tried a million iterations of different kinds of events, morning, evening, this, that, until we figured out like various formulas that worked. And a lot went into like pricing and behavioral economics and, marketing and all that stuff that goes into building like a digital media and events, kind of juggernaut. And, eventually I got kind of like a little bored and a little burnt out. And the truth is, I was running out of ways to grow it. Like, I went to every major city I could in the United States. I even started trying small cities. The small cities didn't really work that well. So I started going abroad. We went to Toronto. But I was seeing that, like, if we fail abroad, then when I sell, the story won't be as good. Like, and so our revenue growth was, I purposely, sort of both purposely and not so purposely, started to slow revenue growth so I could focus on margin and start raising prices, start cutting, start not really cutting costs, but rationalizing costs. Like, do we need 3 of this? Can we have 2? Maybe we pay this person more, but like they own more, whatever. And I started getting the business started going from like $1 million of EBITDA to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. And around that time, Mark Bisnow, who was older, wanted to retire. And the truth is, like, I would have loved to bottom out of the company and kept it, but there was no way for me to set like a fair price that, like, he sort of wanted it to be auctioned off. So, I decided that, of course I would go along with that. And like, I kind of wanted to all be in agreement on what we were doing. And so we decided to put the company up for sale. I learned a lot about that. That took me about a year of like obsessively, basically like starting about a year and a half prior, I started replacing myself with my COO. To the point that, like, I was like, I made him my CEO. I made his co-COO COO. And I actually wanted to take my that COO with me on my journey. He's like my best friend. So I didn't want to leave him behind. So actually then I made another person like COO. And he and me and my other former COO, we basically did nothing for a year but work on selling the company.
Nice.
Sort of from behind the scenes. We built the SIM we hired the investment bank. We built the confidential information memorandum, which is like a big deck.
Yep.
We built the financial model. And I did a lot of this in-house. I actually did not entrust the bank to build the model or build the SIM without like a lot. Like basically we got their advice on it, but we built them. Which I highly recommend because I think you can get a much better outcome if you handle the exit as seriously as you handled building the company.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get why people spend like years building the company and then they kind of like half-ass the exit.
Oh, you know what I think it is, man? I actually think that this has just been my experience of trying to buy companies, and we bought 2 companies in the past year. Dude, I think they have no clue on how to do it. Like you also came from Carlisle. You're a curious, smart guy. Like, I think most operators get really, like, they're afraid of finance. They're afraid, and they should be afraid of private equity because the private equity has sharp teeth. And the bankers, there's margin and mystery, like, so they're not incentivized to teach you how to do it, right? But I think that, to your point, once you get it, then it's if you really want to maximize your exit, the banker wants to maximize it to a certain point from an efficiency standpoint, but they're not the operator. They can't do the things that need to be done internally to maximize it. They can just put whatever lipstick on it they need to and normalize the EBITDA. Yeah, like I think that my observation, maybe you have different thoughts, is I think most entrepreneurs, they probably need to educate themselves more on it before they go to a process. And I do think they need to take it seriously, but I think most are afraid, and I think most are not educated. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think we made probably $15 million extra by running the process. Now, look, the bank ran the process, like at least externally.
Sure.
Like they did all the contacting, they sent the decks, they did, and they did, and also they knew the buyer that bought us. I didn't know that. So I don't want to take anything away from the iBank. What we did that I've never seen a company do before was we built the deck ourselves.
Yeah.
With their advice, with their sort of I looked at all their decks that they did and I got them to make comments, but we did a lot of things in our deck that I've never seen anyone do. And we also built the Excel model ourselves in-house because we just know our business a lot better. And I wanted to dissect and learn my business. There were a lot of flaws in the business and things that you might look at and be like, is that bad? And I wanted to know, is it really bad or is it actually not that bad? And maybe there's a way to tell a story that actually is legit, but we just never analyzed because we, for I don't know, it would take me a while to go into the detail of that, but there was just a lot that we uncovered in the data and the analysis of looking at our numbers where actually in a weird way, when I sold, I was like, shoot, I really don't want to sell it now because I basically convinced myself how freaking good the company was. and by the way, I ended up being right. The company went from 6.5 million of EBITDA to 11.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
It probably was more enduring, which is honestly why I wish I didn't sell it.
Yeah,
but we did. So
the fact that you guys replaced yourselves, you set it up so that the team that was running the business, operating the business, and really running the day to day, they had been doing it for a year before you exited. Is that correct?
Yeah, and really they've been doing it for years because I hired this guy, Will, out of college. I taught him how to do recruiting. Then I made him head of HR. All things I was doing personally. So I'm really training him step by step by step, the Ryan Begelman method,
Yeah.
Then I taught him how to sell a sale, then manage a sales rep, then manage 10 sales reps, then manage, 20 sales reps. Now own sales. Now do event production. Now produce one event. Now produce 10 events. Now run the events team. And by the time he was COO, he could run the company.
Right.
The only thing he didn't have in the final stages were my understanding of finance and my sort of ability to have some degree of vision. And I had maybe a little more creative flair around editorial and a couple other things. But by then he was frankly a better operator than me of the company. Much better at sales, much better at operations, much more organized than me. So I really was leaving the private equity firm with someone who was frankly better at the next stage of the company than I was. And really, I might be better at starting the new next thing, but Will's much better at running the company.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. So I'm going to put you on the spot again right now because we're short on time. I want to do a part 3 and I want to learn about your post exit. Are you cool with that?
No, I'm totally not.
I'm like, dude, you're just Ryan Begelman. You will be the first part 3 in the history of the Greatness Machine. Dude, you tell such great stories and you're such a wealth of knowledge. And I if you're down for it, we're gonna do it.
Yeah,
cool?
I'm 100% down.
All right, let's do it. And I'll make it easier. This one was hard to schedule because my work schedule's been crazy. So I'm like, it can only be early and late. And Ryan's like, I don't do early and late. So, but you were cool enough to do this one late. So we're gonna pivot to post. Let's give the audience a little taste. So you end up exiting, and then
I just want to say one thing before we move on, which is I really want to encourage people to have fun. This was really fun for me. Building Bisnow, building Summit, building Powder Mountain was such a joy. I don't want to I worked my ass off. It was very stressful at times. We almost went bankrupt a dozen times. We almost missed payroll I can't tell you how many times.
Oh my God.
like especially Powder Mountain and Summit. Like we almost missed payroll many times. But like it was such a joy. I did a lot of this with my friends. I hired all my friends. I hired my mom for 8 years. I hired literally my best friends. And I did everything the way I basically wanted to do it. Like I really want to encourage people to have less shame and just do what you want. Business is a way of unlocking your own needs. Like business is a spiritual journey that allows you to fulfill your own needs. Like it doesn't have to be for like your mom or your dad. Like it's if you want to make a lot of money, great. That's a way, and business can do it for you. If you want to like have freedom and travel the world and run your business. Like do it from Zoom. Like it's okay. Like if you don't like working at the company, I didn't go to the office since from the beginning. I didn't like going to the office. Like I would go to the office like 3 hours for fun because like I like playing ping pong at the office and hacking with people. But like I just really did it my way, like, in many respects. Like I sacrificed, but I hired the people I loved. I worked on the projects I really wanted to work on, like part of the reason why we shut down the other newsletters, I don't like the other newsletters as much. Like, like it was, so I just like wanted to emphasize that because, like, and that's part of why I don't like raising a lot of capital because then you get buried underneath pref where you have to pay back the first money to these other people. And now you're doing things you didn't even want to do because you have to like grow to a number you don't like. There were years where I didn't want to work as hard. I didn't work as hard. Like we just didn't grow as much. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, and look, I had to make it right with my employees. Like I had to also like, I can't go take, a month off and not make sure that they also either get to take time off or I compensate them well. So I'm not saying like be selfish and hurt people. No, I'm saying like make consensual arrangements with all your stakeholders so that you can unlock your own needs. And like, I don't know. That's really important to me. I think like, I just want to encourage people.
Listen, I think you're speaking to something that's really important. And I'd love to dive into this more on the next episode, which is designing a life, right? Being intentional and designing the life you want. And one of the most important parts, I think, of being an entrepreneur is that you are giving up certainty, right? Because there's like a job. At least when I have a job, they have to pay me like what they agreed to pay me, and I'm supposed to get that. And I get it day one when I show up. And the price to that is I don't necessarily have a lot of the flexibility that a Ryan or a Darius might have when I take on the risk of starting something and growing it, which has a lot of other negatives too, that like sacrifice and stuff like that you don't necessarily have. You can leave and it's not your business. And if it blows up, like you go find another job. But I do think that there's an element of this, and a lot of the people that I'm really good friends with or even mentors of mine that have had amazing lives, it's around being intentional and designing the life you want. That's at least what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. And like, look, it's not for everyone. Entrepreneurship can be stressful. It can be fun, but it's extremely liberating to be your own boss, to make your own schedule. Like I don't like taking meetings. So for many years at Bisnow, I refused to take meetings. Like I won't do one-on-ones. I don't do one-on-one. Like a lot of people do all these things like because some book said you're supposed to do one-on-ones. Like I'm like, screw one-on-ones. I never did one-on-ones. And like there's so many roads to Rome. That's another point I want to make. Like I ran my business in a very eccentric, like different way. Like I'm often on an Indo board. I'm often stretching on the floor. Like I do interviews. Again, I'm not saying be unprofessional. Like, but I'm like, if you like doing interviews and on a, where you're sitting in two couches in like a cozy cafe, like if that,
Go for it.
that's great. Like you can do that. You don't have to be in like a boardroom, So whatever that is, some people like to be more buttoned up and polished and, that's great. So I just think it's a way of having self-expression and getting to like be, more self-expressed and getting to live at the edge of like your personality and get to experiment with who you really are and discover who you might be. So to me, it's all of those things. And for the people who are excited, who are lifetime learners, who are super curious, I feel I'm almost like selling entrepreneurship now, but I'm like, try entrepreneurship. It's really, it can be a real, like, it can be a hoot, like it can be fun. It doesn't have to be that serious.
Yeah, I love it, man. This is such a great message for people that are considering it, and for those that, and I think it's a good message for those that are doing it that maybe aren't doing it that way. And I'm a person that's actually like I won't say struggled, but I've grinded through entrepreneurship, and I'm just now kind of coming to, and for a long time, I'm just now coming to where you're at. So,
And I'll say one last thing, which is also trust your into. A lot of my clients, I'm often having to help them, encourage them to trust their instincts. They often think, oh, but there's some expert who said we're supposed to do. Like, the experts don't know anything. Like, they, and even if they do, it doesn't mean you have to do it their way. Like, do it your way. And then if it doesn't work, obviously, like, adjust, read book. I'm not saying don't read books, but there's so many ways to do it. And I have lots of coaching clients who do things that you'd be like, even I'm like, wow, you get like that worked. Like, are you serious? Like, I didn't know you could do that like that. Like, and some of them do it so different than me. I'm like they do tons of one-on-ones, and their whole day is calendar meetings, and like it works for them, and they love it. They get energy out. So it's just, I just think, like, I hope people will make their own way and really trust that their instincts actually are valuable, that there is information in feeling your feelings, and there is information in trusting your gut. Like, they're not, those are valuable.
Yeah, I love that, man. Hey, do you mind, so we're not going to do greatness question today. I want to save that for episode 3, because I think it's going to be an awesome greatness question with you. But people that want to connect with you.
Answer already scripted.
Yeah, you got to hold on to it, man. Take a picture.
Because it was like the one question that was like kind of hard.
So we're gonna we'll record the next episode quickly so that you don't have to leave that sticky laying around. If people want to learn more about your coaching, where can they find you on for that type of stuff? If assuming you advertise it.
Yeah, it's Ryan Begelman, my name. RYAN, B as in boy, EGELMAN at .com. RyanBegelman.com. They can just go on there and find me and email me. My contact is on there. I'm also ryan.begelman@gmail.
Cool.
So yeah, they can find me there.
All right, guys, go for people that are interested. When you guys hear this, definitely go check out Ryan. Man, you're such a wealth of knowledge, and you've done so many cool things. I am super pumped that we're doing part 3, Ryan Begelman, Greatness Machine. First time ever in the history of the show. We're going to be learning all about what post-exit looked like for you. Because even when we first started talking about doing the show, Ryan is a fact finder, so he's wanted to do a pre-show with me just to learn about the show. And we were like most of the stuff we talked about was post-exit, and we haven't even gotten there. So I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm losing that episode. So I'm so pumped for us to do a part 3, and so much gratitude having you come on today and share your amazing entrepreneurial story. Looking forward to finishing this up with you with our first part 3.
Yeah, and if people want, they can put their email on my website. I've actually never sent an email, but one of these things I'll do an Ask Me Anything. So put your email in there, and I'll email you if I ever decide to do that.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate you, and looking forward to our part 3. All right?
All right, buddy. It's good seeing you.
All right, everybody. Peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.